These are all the bees that outlived their life. They live about 45 days in the summertime. And about once a week I come in and sweep up. Because these hives are on a wooden floor, I actually get to see how many bees died. Most people don't, because their bees leave right out the entrance and head out into the field. So you don't see all of these bees then. Make sure there's no cobwebs, spider webs anywhere around here. Like this one. And look, this is just probably on the last day or two. Some little spiders built in it. I'm cool on spiders. I'm not cool on spiders over by my bees. This is 2 little drones, and it's mid-August, early mid-August. So this is the time when most queens who've been mated, they're already mated. So these drones don't have much of a function. There'll still be a few around, but they don't need to have nearly as many as they needed in the springtime. So I'm guessing, since we've got all these girls over here, and we've got these 2 little boys over here, that they were kicked out yesterday. You'll notice I have no roof. I really think it's important about every 3 years or so that you take the plastic off of it and just let the sun and the moon and the stars come down in here and just, I don't know, I think it just invigorates the soil in a different way. So what I do in this year, the year that we don't have it closed in, is, for one thing, I just see what comes up. So we had, when you were here before, we had mustard that was this high. This whole thing was like this high, and it was just covered with yellow flowers. And my bees were in here. We probably had 800 mustard plants in here in bloom, and they were all this high. It was just fabulous. So I just cut them all down about maybe a week and a half ago. And a lot of what I'm doing in here, it looks like if you raise bees or butterflies, there's a certain element of pandemonium that, it's kind of like, what would bloom naturally here? I really think that I'm never going to be the kind of gardener where everything is picked up and neat, because I think there's a lot of things that happen in the messiness of nature. So I'm really interested in that there's food for everybody. One of my first years when I got bees, probably my 3rd year, I was like, oh, I've got 15 hives, I'm going to have 20, I'm going to have 40, I'm going to have 100. And that was the year I noticed that my native bee population went way down. And I went, you know what's wrong? I don't have enough food for everybody. And that's not right. So I cut down my number of hives. I gave away a bunch of hives. But the other thing was, I realized if I'm going to bring bees in and I want to have more bees be here, then I need to plant stuff. I need to have a lot of bee food around. So we cycle it through the seasons, different times. We'll have different things coming up. And everything feeds somebody. And that's the thing with weeds. A lot of people, would weed this out and have just the sunflowers. It's like, no, I need to have all the weeds, because you never know who is that dinner for. I want to have that whole harmonic of all the different kinds of bees and insects and birds and snakes and lizards and everything here. And that's true on our farm. There's so much that lives here. I see more butterflies every year, and that tells me, great, I'm doing a really good job with habitat. That's wonderful. If I have patience and there's something going on in the hive, if I have patience, they'll probably figure out the solution to it. I've come to trust that if I follow the way nature's designed this, that all things are going to work out better in the end. So if there's a weak hive in nature, the weak hive dies. If there's a strong hive in nature, the strong hive is going to make it. And that's what nature's doing all the time, is saying, you're not strong enough to go in the gene pool, so we're going to let this one die. This one over here, you guys are doing incredible work. Go on and flourish. So my style of beekeeping, it's funny because the more years I've been in it, the less I think of it as beekeeping. I don't do that much anymore. I provide them with homes that are really serving their needs, and I provide them with a lot of food out in the fields, out here in the shady areas, food that they're going to love and eat, and lots of fruit trees and things like that. But I don't do a lot of handling in the hives anymore. When I first learned to beekeep in a conventional way, which I never went along with anyway, but I remember learning that in the conventional system, you're supposed to go in your beehives every 7 to 10 days, and if you're not in there looking and checking and seeing what's going on, you're a bad beekeeper. Well, I'm a really bad beekeeper because I hardly ever go in my hives. What I've learned is I can sit at the front door and I can probably tell you almost everything that's going on in the hive just by watching the activities at the front door. Is there pollen coming in? Then there's babies in there. I don't have to open it up and look in the nursery and count up babies. I know if there's baby food coming in, the pollen, that's already handled. You can tell just by the personality of the hive, the tone of the hive, that things are going well or they're not going well. So I trust nature. That's what it's really taught me. I trust nature. If there seems to be a problem in there and I look at it and I go, I wonder how that's going to resolve itself. And I'll tell you, 95 out of 98 times, that's exactly what happens. The bees resolve it on their own, and every once in a while, a hive simply fails. And I've come to learn to trust that that's nature saying that's a hive that's got weakness in it, and that weakness we don't want in the gene pool. So we're letting that hive exit the gene pool, and the rest of the bees do well. So my bees tend to do really well. In the early days, keeping bees the first few years, I lost as many hives as I kept. These years, it's really quite common for me to have 100% survival through the winter, and that's kind of unusual in a time when we're losing 40% of our bees annually. I think most people understand that a lot of pesticides and herbicides in the environment can't be good for bees, introducing poisons, of course. And the GMOs, I think that's really going off in a weird direction where you douse everything with chemicals to kill all the weeds, and that just ends up being in bees. I know one of the things is that corn is thought to be is a crop that's not pollinated by bees. That's what they say, not pollinated by bees. The pollen on corn, and corn is one of the major GMO things in crops in the world right now, and certainly in the U.S. Corn is pollinated by wind coming through, and the pollen loosens up and it cross-pollinates. So you don't need bees to do it. But that's the key thing. You don't need bees to pollinate corn. However, if you ever go out in a cornfield and look around, you'll see there are bees everywhere. The pollen is readily available. But this doesn't make it onto the list of places where you have to be careful of bees, because corn is on a list that says it's not pollinated by bees. Do you get what? It's such a subtle political description of that, and yet bees are getting it into their systems. And some of these things, some of these nasty chemicals persist in the bee system. And I know one study was done where it said that this chemical that was going to be used in the fields didn't harm bees. They did a study and it lasted 17 days. And in those 17 days, they didn't see a major drop-off. Well, guess what happens on day 18? They closed the study off at day 17 because at day 18 there was a tremendous amount of damage. And then another study that did a follow-up on that found that indeed there was a lot of damage done to the bees, and they went, and this new study went 5 generations and found that damage persisted through 5 generations. That was as far as they went. So when you get a company that makes GMO products, they're going to show you the study that only goes to day 17 and says, no harm. But then you have the other people who are doing studies that say, wow, from day 18 on in the next 5 generations, there's quite a bit of damage to the bees and their systems and how it persists in their systems. More than that, though, I think one of the biggest reasons for colony collapse disorder is because we're making so many mistakes in the management methods that we use with bees. Conventional management with bees has really gone off in a weird direction where we're doing things with bees that are so much easier for humans to do, but we're not asking the critical question, which is, what's best for the bees? So is it best for the bees that I go in and move their hives all around every 7 to 10 days? Probably not. Is it best for the bees that we put them in boxes that can be lifted up and forklifted so that we can do migratory beekeeping? I don't think that's a good thing for bees. Is it best to mass produce queens and artificially inseminate them and then spread them out, sell them to all different parts of the country? I don't think that's a good idea. We introduced diseases into parts of the country where we didn't have bee diseases before because we ship them around like this, either through migratory beekeeping or through the way that most people get involved in raising a backyard hive. Is they go order bees from a big company. I don't think the genes are that strong in those bees compared to these wild bees that are making it on their own. So I think one of the main things, and it doesn't get talked of too often, is management. The way that most people are taught to take care of bees is not the best way to take care of bees. And if the one question that ran all of your activities as a beekeeper was, what's best for the bees? What's truly best for the bees on their own in nature? And then all decisions were made from that. I think you'd see massive changes in how bees were being raised. This is my favorite way to keep bees. You just give them a home that's exactly what they want and let them do whatever they want. Yes? Hi. So she just asked me to back up. Oh, I like to think that I was somebody who was, kind of tuned into nature before, but I wouldn't say in any grand way. And now I notice little things that I guess didn't make a difference to me before. Like, how am I around my friends? Am I someone who builds relationships? Am I someone who has a nice harmony around me? That's become more important. I don't want to run roughshod through my community. I want to find who's weak and needs help, who's strong and has something to say, how do we all interact too? And when I see the bees in the hive and I see how every single little bee has a task and she's intent on doing that task to the best of her ability, I think, wow, as humans, there's a whole lot we could learn from that. What if we all did our task the best possible way and we shared the effort and we made sure that no one was harmed in the process? That's the stuff that makes me feel like getting up out of bed in the morning and getting on with my day.